The wagon skidded violently along the rocky forest path, wheels splintering under the uneven ground. Alara clutched the side, heart hammering, her knuckles white with terror. She had never imagined her first journey as the new maid to the Alpha King's palace would end like this, alone, stranded, and teetering on the edge of life and death. The forest loomed around her, dark and silent, shadows twisting like predators waiting to strike. Panic surged as the wagon tipped, throwing her to the ground, pain shooting through her body. Her cries echoed into the night unheard. Somewhere above the treetops, a pair of amber eyes glinted with fury. Raylan, the Alpha King, had sensed something was wrong the moment the council reported her disappearance. His wolf had smelled the faint trace of fear and blood, pulling him inexorably toward the source. Nothing and no one could stand between him and the girl who had vanished before his eyes. When he finally reached the wreckage, he found her barely clinging to consciousness, shivering, broken, yet somehow alive. In that instant, something within him snapped. This fragile, defiant girl had survived against all odds, and Raylan knew one thing with absolute certainty: she was his now. And he would not let her go, not to danger, not to anyone, not even to fate itself. The moon hung low over the dense forest, silver light spilling through the trees, illuminating the trail in fractured patterns. The Alpha King, Raylan, stood atop the ridge, his senses alert, his wolf instincts flaring. The reports had been strange. His new maid, assigned by the council for the palace, had never arrived. No sign at the station, no messages, no word. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. Raylan's amber eyes narrowed. This wasn't mere carelessness. His pack had a reputation, every task was executed with precision, and yet her absence tugged at something deep within him, a subtle unease that refused to fade. He turned his long coat, catching the cold night wind, and leaped down the slope. The forest floor crunched underfoot, each step measured, every breath steady. He followed the faint traces of a wagon's path, disturbed foliage, broken twigs, the subtle chaos of a disaster. Hours later, Raylan reached the site of the wreckage. The wagon lay overturned, splintered wood scattered like fallen teeth of some giant beast. He inhaled sharply. The air was thick with the scent of blood and damp earth. Then he saw it. A figure barely moving under a tattered cloak. Mud and blood painted her skin, hair matted with debris. And even in that pitiful state, something about her made Raylan's chest tighten. Her lips quivered as she tried to sit, and her hazel eyes, wide with fear, met his. "You," he said, his voice low, commanding, yet laced with a tenderness he rarely showed. "You were supposed to arrive safely." Aye, she stammered, unable to form words. Her body shivered violently, not just from the cold but from the shock and pain. Without another thought, Raylan dropped to his knees beside her, his hand firm on her shoulder. He could feel the thrum of her heartbeat against his palm, fast and erratic. His wolf stirred inside him, sensing her vulnerability, her fragility, yet also a faint flicker of strength. "You're safe now," he murmured, lifting her gently. She fit against him like a puzzle piece, and for a brief second, he imagined never letting her go. The trek back to the palace was grueling. He carried her across rough terrain, ignoring the gnawing ache in his arms. His mind was a whirlwind. Who would have done this? Why? And most pressing of all, who was she, that she could so easily invade the Alpha King's thoughts simply by existing? By the time they reached the palace gates, the first hints of dawn brushed the sky with pink and gold. He laid her on a soft bed, blankets piled around her. Her breathing evened slightly, and her eyes fluttered closed. He lingered, watching, feeling something unfamiliar, a protective obsession that clawed at his heart. The council's orders, the need for control, the duty of an alpha, none of it mattered now. This girl, barely a stranger, had already claimed his attention, his concern, and perhaps something more. Outside her room, Raylan stood alone, the early sunlight casting long shadows. His wolf growled low in his chest, not in anger, but in warning. Whoever had tried to harm her, whoever had left her for dead, would answer to him, and he would not be merciful. Yet beneath the fury, a quiet curiosity lingered. Who was she? How had she survived? And why did the thought of her in danger make his chest tighten in ways he hadn't known possible? The new maid had never arrived, but Raylan had found her, barely alive, And from that moment, he knew her life, and perhaps her heart, would never be his to leave alone again. The morning sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the palace chamber, glinting off the polished floors. But inside, the air was heavy with a quiet stillness. The maid, her name, as Raylan finally learned, was Elura, stirred beneath the blankets. Her body ached, bruises blooming across her arms and legs, and every breath was a reminder of the near death she had barely escaped. When her hazel eyes finally opened, they met the sharp amber gaze of Raylan, who had been watching her silently from across the room. He did not move immediately, letting her adjust to the light and the reality that she was safe. "You're awake," he said finally, his voice deep and smooth, commanding yet strangely gentle. Elara's throat was dry, but she managed a hoarse whisper. I thought I was going to die." Her voice cracked, and her hands instinctively clutched at the blankets, as if holding on to the last fragments of security. "You shouldn't have been out there alone," Raylan replied, stepping closer. His presence filled the room like a storm contained. "And I told the council you would not survive a night on your own. I was right to track the wreckage." Elara swallowed hard, the pain in her body matched by the unfamiliar heat of embarrassment and awe that flared in her chest. Something about him, his sheer presence, the intensity of his gaze, was suffocating yet intoxicating. She had been trained to be obedient, quiet, unseen, and yet, with him watching her, she felt almost alive. Raylan knelt beside the bed, inspecting her injuries with precise care, his fingers brushing against her skin in ways that made her pulse hitch. "You are lucky," he murmured. "Very lucky." Elara's lips parted, but no words came. She simply nodded, unable to explain the storm of gratitude and fear and desire that swirled within her. The Alpha King's wolf stirred, low and growling beneath his chest, sensing her vulnerability and, more disturbingly, the faint spark of resistance within her spirit. This girl, fragile as she appeared, was strong in ways most could not comprehend, and Raylan, for the first time in years, felt an unfamiliar pull, a need not just to protect, but to possess. Hours passed. The palace healers arrived, but Raylan refused to leave Elara's side. He administered salves himself, adjusted bandages with careful precision, and every time his fingers brushed hers, a current shot up her arm, leaving her breathless. "You should rest," he finally commanded, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You've endured enough for one lifetime." Elara's gaze lingered on him, searching for hidden intentions. She had heard stories about the Alpha King, legendary untouchable, feared and revered by his pack. But the man before her, the man who had carried her from death's edge, was something else entirely terrifying and tender, cruel and protective, impossible and magnetic. As night fell, Raylan remained vigilant. The palace was quiet, yet the shadows outside whispered of unseen threats, those who had caused the wagon accident, those who would see her harmed again. His wolf growled low in his chest. Anyone who dared come for her would face the wrath of the Alpha King. And yet, even as danger loomed, Raylan could not ignore the other pull, the one that drew him closer to her, the one that made his chest ache with a longing he did not fully understand. "You survived," he murmured, almost to himself, as he watched her sleep. "But surviving will not be enough. I will make sure you are more than safe. I will make sure you are mine." Elara stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep, and Raylan's amber eyes softened. He knew this was the beginning, not just of her recovery, but of something far more dangerous, far more intoxicating than either of them could have predicted. Outside, the night whispered its secrets. And inside, the Alpha King and the new maid were already bound together by fate, by survival, and by a desire that neither fully understood yet. The palace corridors were quiet, but Raylan's senses were anything but. Every shadow seemed to shift with intent, every whisper of wind carried secrets. He could not shake the feeling that those who had targeted Elara were still out there, waiting, plotting. And his wolf, restless and alert, mirrored his unease. Elara had spent the day recovering in her room, but even in her weakened state, she moved with a cautious grace. Every glance at Raylan made her pulse skip. His presence was overpowering, impossible to ignore. She had always believed that power and protection were things to admire from afar, but now she was in the center of it, surrounded by the raw intensity of the Alpha King himself. When Raylan entered her room that evening, she startled, heart hammering. "Your injuries are healing faster than I expected," he remarked, his tone calm but edged with something unspoken. His amber eyes seemed to pierce her very soul. "But there are other wounds, the kind that cannot be seen." Alara felt heat rise to her cheeks. She tried to hide it, tried to look away, but the pull between them was undeniable. Her wolf instincts, faint, untrained, and unaware of what it meant, flickered in response to his presence. She was drawn to him, yet terrified. "Other wounds," she whispered. "Trauma leaves marks," he said, stepping closer. The faintest brush of his fingers against her arm sent shivers racing through her. "And some wounds require more than medicine. They require attention, protection, and sometimes—" His voice dropped, rougher now, the recognition of what is theirs by right. Her breath hitched. Every word was a caress, every glance a claim. She had been cautious before, taught to fear men like him, alpha kings untouchable and dangerous. But here, in the confines of the palace room, with his gaze fixed on her, she felt the impossible desire that mingled with fear. Raylan's wolf growled low, sensing her hesitance but also the spark of resistance beneath it. He leaned in, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. "Do you feel it, Alara?" he asked, his voice a husky whisper. The bond forming the pull. Alara's lips trembled. She did feel it, the undeniable electric connection that made her heart race and her body ache in ways she had never known. And yet, fear battled desire. I don't know," she admitted, her voice barely audible. Raylan's jaw tightened. "You do. You feel it because you are mine. And I will not let anyone harm you again. Not the ones who caused this. Not anyone else, not even yourself." The tension in the room was suffocating. Her body pressed instinctively toward him, yet she tried to resist. He was the Alpha King, a figure of authority, danger, and power. She was just a maid, barely surviving, fragile, untested. And yet the pull between them was magnetic, undeniable, a force that defied reason. Before she could react, he bent down, brushing a strand of wet hair from her face. The touch was electric, intimate, and for a brief second, the world outside ceased to exist. Only the two of them remained, her vulnerability and his fierce, possessive intensity. "Lara," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to hers. "You were lost, but now you are found, and I will claim what is mine." Her heart raced. Fear, desire, confusion all collided within her. She knew she should pull away, resist, protect herself from the overwhelming presence of the Alpha King. And yet, some deep, instinctual part of her wanted nothing more than to give in, to surrender to the warmth, to the protection, to the undeniable pull of the wolf and the man. Outside, the shadows shifted. Danger had not left. But inside, a different fire had been ignited. One that neither Alara nor Raylan could ignore. One that would bind them together in ways that went far beyond mere survival. Night fell again over the palace, but sleep eluded both Raylan and Alara. The corridors were quiet, yet the Alpha King's instincts whispered of lurking threats. The wagon incident had not been an accident. Someone had wanted her gone, and Raylan intended to find out who. Alara sat at the edge of her bed, her fingers tracing the intricate embroidery on the blanket. She could still feel the weight of Raylan's presence, the warmth of his hands, the intensity of his gaze. It was intoxicating, confusing, terrifying. A sudden soft knock at the door startled her. She froze, heart pounding. "Enter," Raylan's deep voice commanded from the shadows. He stepped into the room, his silhouette framed by the moonlight. His expression was unreadable, but the wolf in him hummed beneath the surface, alert, vigilant. "I won't leave you alone," he said simply. "Not tonight, not ever, until I know you are safe." Alara's throat tightened. She wanted to protest, to assert some semblance of independence, but the fear and the longing tangled together too tightly. "I don't want to be a burden," she whispered. "You are not a burden." He snapped, his amber eyes flashing. "You are mine, and anyone who dares to harm you will answer to me." The possessiveness in his tone made her pulse race in ways she had never anticipated. It was frightening and thrilling. She felt her lips part instinctively, as though she might speak the words she couldn't fully articulate. Then, a sudden noise outside, footsteps on the marble floor, snapped them both to attention. Raylan's wolf growled low, his entire body tensing. He moved toward the door, and Alara instinctively stepped closer, drawn by his power and presence. The door creaked, revealing a messenger from the council. His face was pale, anxiety etched into every line. Alpha King, there's been news about her past, and it may explain why someone targeted her. Raylan's jaw tightened. Explain. The messenger swallowed, handing over a sealed parchment. Raylan's eyes scanned the document, and his expression darkened with each word. Alara's heart sank as she realized the truths she had tried to bury, secrets of her lineage, the enemies she didn't know she had, and the dangers that had followed her all the way to the palace, were now fully exposed. Raylan's voice was low, dangerous. They've been hunting you for years, haven't they? Not because of your work, but because of who you are. Alara's eyes widened. I didn't know. I thought I was just an orphan trying to survive. You've been more than that, he said, stepping closer, his fingers brushing hers. You've been a target, and now that I know, I will protect you. All of you. The intensity of his gaze made her knees weak. There was no denying it now, the bond between them was not just survival or circumstance, it was a dangerous, consuming fire, one that neither could resist. Raylan's wolf circled, sensing the threat outside but also the tension inside. He leaned down, his lips grazing her ear as he whispered, "You are mine, Alara. Every secret, every fear, every heartbeat. I will claim them all." Her breath hitched, her pulse racing, the terror of her past mixing with the exhilaration of the present. And in that moment, she understood something that frightened her almost as much as the danger itself. She was falling for the Alpha King. Outside the palace walls, the shadows stirred. Threats were closing in and time was running out, but inside, the fire between Raylan and Alara burned hotter than ever. An unspoken promise, a dangerous attraction, and a bond forged in survival, desire, and destiny. The forest outside the palace was alive with whispers, predators, spies, enemies, each moving like shadows in the moonlight. Raylan's senses were stretched to their limits, his wolf prowling invisibly, alert to every disturbance. He knew they had only hours before those who had hunted Alara struck again. "Lara," he said, his voice low and commanding as he appeared at her chamber door. "You must come with me." Now, her eyes widened, panic flaring. No time for questions," he interrupted sharply. His amber eyes held no room for argument. She could feel the undercurrent of his wolf, the raw intensity beneath his calm surface. Her instincts screamed to obey, yet her heart raced for reasons that had nothing to do with fear. She followed him silently, her steps quick, keeping pace with his long, powerful strides. They moved through the secret corridors of the palace, down twisting staircases, and out into the forest beyond. Raylan's hand brushed hers once, a fleeting contact that sent an electric shock through her body. Her pulse raced, but she could not afford distraction, not now. They reached a clearing where the night was thick, the shadows hiding unseen eyes. Raylan crouched, scanning the darkness. "They're close," he muttered, growling low. His wolf shimmered just beneath the surface, ready to leap, ready to kill if necessary. Alara's chest tightened, the adrenaline, fear, and inexplicable desire tangled inside her, making it impossible to think clearly. "Raylan, I'm scared," she admitted softly. His amber eyes softened, and for the first time she saw not just the Alpha King, but the man, the protector, the predator, and the impossible passion burning within him. He knelt beside her, fingers brushing her cheek. "You have nothing to fear," he murmured. "Not while I am here. You belong to me now, and I will not let anyone take you from me." Her breath hitched at the words, the possessiveness, the heat of his gaze. Every fiber of her being responded to him, the fear, the longing, the dangerous pull of the Alpha who had found her barely alive. A sudden rustle in the trees made them both spin. Figures emerged from the shadows, masked, armed, intent on harm. Raylan's wolf erupted, a low, lethal growl that echoed through the clearing. Without hesitation he moved, a blur of power and precision, shielding Alara with his massive frame. Alara watched, heart in her throat, as Raylan fought. Every movement was controlled, brutal, mesmerizing. And yet, amidst the danger, she felt an undeniable thrill, a part of her awakening in the presence of a man who was unstoppable, dangerous, and completely hers. When the attackers were finally subdued, Raylan turned to her, chest heaving, sweat and moonlight glinting on his skin. He pulled her close, his hands firm on her waist. "Do you understand now?" he asked, voice rough with intensity. "You are mine, no one touches you. Not now, not ever." Her knees weakened, her lips parted, and her body pressed instinctively against his. I understand," she whispered, though part of her wanted to scream at the intensity, the fire that consumed her every thought. Raylan's eyes softened only slightly, but the wolf inside him rumbled, claiming its prize. He bent, brushing his lips to her forehead in a possessive, intimate gesture. "Good," he murmured, "because I do not give second chances." The forest was silent now, save for the rapid beating of their hearts. And in that stillness, a dangerous promise lingered between them, a bond forged in survival, in passion, and in the undeniable truth that Alara was no longer just a maid who had barely survived. She was the Alpha King's, and he would stop at nothing to claim her entirely.